We're here in my open door boat shop, and I've got my little dory, my little sport dory here, hung from the overhead. Now, this isn't something that you see all the time. It's upside down and it's hanging from the overhead here, and there's a reason for it. You know, it's not awfully heavy, so it really wasn't very hard to get it up there. It weighs 154 pounds, that's before I put the skeg on it. So I would say that the boat, with a couple coats of paint, weighs about 160 pounds. And I don't think that's awfully heavy, but it is a little heavier than it would be if it was a lightweight plywood one. I like that. So now I want to go underneath here and show you why we've actually got it hanging upside down before I do any of the varnish work. But what we're out to do here is to get the rails and the inwhales varnished without getting varnish on the rest of the boat, inside or outside. So, you know, I'm going to try to make it as easy on myself as possible, and this is part to do with it. So let's go underneath and take a look. Now this is my little version of under the lee of the longboat right here, if anybody remembers anything about that. Now, the reason why I've got it tied up overhead like this by this rod through the rowlocks here is that I don't want anything getting in my way, and I wanted the boat to be upside down like this because I don't want any of the varnish running down inside. I'd have to keep cleaning it up. I'm going to oil the inside of the boat, and I can't have any drips of any sort of varnish or anything on it. So it was taking too much chances, you know, to try to varnish it the other way, upside right. And it's very hard to tape off. The tape doesn't stick to the plastic, and the tape does not stick to the cedar either, unless the cedar is sanded awfully smooth. So, you know, we thought about it for quite a while, and we decided that if we hung it upside down, I'd be able to paint out or varnish out the inwhales all the way up onto the corner, onto the top of it, and we're also going to varnish the outwhale or the guard up on top of the shear plank and all the way around the outside. So what we want to do is get varnish on those surfaces, but we don't want any varnish up inside there because it would just look foolish running down the inside of the boat. We're going to oil that inside there as well as the back of the inwhale. We're going to oil all of that. Like I say, I don't want any varnish dripping down the side, so I've put the boat upside down, and we're going to try it upside down and just see how well it works. I know the chance of getting a little run or a drip off the edges here is a possibility, but I'm not too worried about it. I think I can just coat that right back out again like that as soon as it runs down. So, you know, we're going to try it out and see how we make out. I'm going around now with a piece of 220 sandpaper, and I'm sanding all the surfaces of the guards and the inwhales the best I can. And I'm making sure that the corners are sanded off round, because if the corners are rounded a little bit, they hold the varnish a little bit better. A real crispy, sharp corner, it doesn't hold the varnish as well as the fact that you could chip the varnish off of it a lot easier. So, you know, I'm being very careful. I could have taped off the white first, but I've been awful careful. You know, if you do tape off the white first, it saves you from scratching that paint job with your sandpaper. So it's probably a real good idea. You don't see it here, but this is an important step. You wouldn't want to apply the varnish to any wood that's rough or hasn't been sanded. You want to get it down as smooth as you can. When you do apply the varnish, it kind of raises the grain a little tiny bit, so you end up having to sand it again. It's a very important step. You want it as smooth as possible before you start varnishing. Right now, I'm wiping the rails down, just tacking it off a little bit with a rag and some thinner. And I'm not going to use a tack rag. I don't think there's any real reason to do that. This will clean it up just as good as it has to be. And once I've got it cleaned up, get most of the dust off of it, and I'll be able to start applying some sealer. Now, it's a varnish sealer that I'm going to be using before I go to the gleam varnish. Now I'm going to start off using TotalBoat Wood Sealer Varnish Primer. And I don't think it needs any mixing really, but I'm going to shake it up and see what it feels like in the can here. Oh, it feels right to me already. Now, we've got it shaken up. We're going to pry the top off a little bit here. And take a look at it, and maybe stick a stir stick in it and just see what that feels like. Oh yeah, that's real good. Yeah, that doesn't require any more mixing than that. That's all taken care of right there. The thing that I do want to do, though, before I go on, you can see that the lip of the can is trapping varnish. You know, I would have to wipe that out if I didn't put these holes in there. You know, people ask me all the time about these holes, whether it's going to spoil the seal of the can when I put the top back on. But it doesn't spoil the seal of the can at all. And what it does is the can seals up to the outside lip. The top seals up to the outside lip, so it doesn't hurt anything. It only helps. So we're just going to roll it around one more time, one more hole, and that's taken care of. Now that will drain the varnish right back down inside there. Now I'm going to wipe off my stir stick here. And set that aside. Now I'm just going to pour my wood sealer into my paint pot, and I'm not going to put an awful lot in there because it stretches out quite a ways when you do use it. I can always go back and fill it up again or add some more varnish to it or some more thinner or whatever I want to do. So first I'm going to get started with a small amount just like this. I'm going to start off kind of slow here with the wood sealer on the inwhale and just see how it feels. You know, see how much varnish or see how much sealer soaks into the surface, see how it spreads, see how much runs down the brush. You know, get a feel for the whole thing before I continue along down the whole length of the inwhale. In addition to the inwhale, what I'm doing is varnishing the very top of the guard as well as the shear plank. Now I'm being very careful not to wipe my brush the wrong way so I get like a pile of varnish that runs up inside the boat. Not that it would run down the boat, just don't want to pile it up alongside the frame or on the inside of the boat because that surface is all going to be oiled. You have to develop a technique as you go, you know, because you can do it the wrong way. You can get way too much buildup in the corner of the frames or anything. You could always scrape it out with a razor blade quite easily because it won't run down the inside. At the most, it would only be up in there maybe 1/8 of an inch or so. So it's not a problem. But like I said, you don't want to wipe tons of varnish off into those corners. You want to be very nice and careful, and the more careful you are, it actually saves you time. You know, if you go along slow, it seems like you're going along fast. Now what I'm going to do is start varnishing the roll-lock sockets here, or the stands, and I just got to do it kind of quickly because I don't want to get stuck in this area for any length of time here. I'm kind of only doing my side because I'm going to go on the outside of the boat and do everything on the guard from outside. So basically all I'm trying to do is the top of it here and the inside part like this. Now you'll notice that I removed the roll-lock sockets, the bronze parts, from my stands here, and that was just so that I could get varnish right up underneath them. So I put the all-lock sockets up in the holes without the roll-lock sockets, and that really made it work out pretty well. Later on I'll just pull these out and then stick the roll-lock sockets back in the same hole, and it should work out just fine. So. Just like the corners and the edges, when you pass a wet brush over that rivet head, you can get a run. So you have to be careful there. Now, in order to stop that, you have to dry your brush out, whether it's in your pot, or wipe it out on the surface that you're varnishing, and go back around those rivet heads and just touch up those runs. Now I'm just going to tip it out towards the transom here, just make sure I don't have any runs over these rivets. Cut it up close to the transom. Now I'm moving on to the guards. Now this is quite a bit easier because I can stand up in a real nice position, and it's very fast and goes along real easy. The only thing I have to be careful of here is that I make one pass underneath to make sure I don't have any runs off the edge of that guard. I always loved applying the varnish to oak like this, especially quartered oak. Well, this is kind of semi-quartered. You can see the medullary rays kind of on an angle in here, and the varnish just brings them right out. So, you know, it's really satisfying to spread a finish on white oak, especially as far as I'm concerned. There's one side almost complete, just another foot or two back aft here, and the guard will be varnished, and we're going to move right on to the other side. I think it came out great. This particular product doesn't seem to have much tendency to run whatsoever, which is really an advantage. So I'm really happy about that, because we were a little bit worried about this whole technique that we had put together here, but at this point my worries are over. It's working out fantastic. Now it's time to varnish the breast hook. And the first thing I'm going to do is put a little coat on the very inside of it. Well, you can't even see. I just want to make sure that I've got the bottom side of it sealed up a little bit. Wow, it really looks good when you spread some varnish on it. It just makes it pop like crazy. I love the way the grain follows the breast hook right around. I like making them out of those 60-degree crooks out of oak trees. And it's got that like squirrely grain right down the middle of it. It really adds a lot of character to the boat, and it draws your eye right to it. It's going along great at this point. The only issue that I am having is a little bit of the sealer is running down the brush onto the handle. Now there's different things you can do about this. You can wrap a rag around the handle. You can put a little tape dam around it. I am wearing plastic gloves, and basically all I've done is elected to just pick up a rag every so often and wipe off the handle. Well, this certainly isn't normal here, having the boat suspended upside down above me, but it seems to be working out a lot better than we really even thought it would. It's, you know, not having any trouble running off the corners. It's a pretty convenient spot. I don't have to lean over and work. And I don't know, it's pretty good. We're okay with it. I'm on to the guard on the starboard side at this point, and we're moving right along. I've got a great feel for how the varnish applies, how thick it should be, and how fast I can go, so I'm not having any problems whatsoever. I'm getting it done, and I'm getting it done in a reasonable amount of time. This wood sealer acts like a varnish primer. It fills the grain and seals the wood in preparation for varnish. Now I'm just finishing up with a coat of TotalBoat Wood Sealer, and it has gone on really, really nicely. I like the way that I suspended the boat overhead. I think it's done me a real good job, because it's been comfortable doing it. I haven't had to lean over with my head upside down inside or anything like that. I don't have any runs, no drips, no errors. Looks great. After getting a really good look at the guards and the breast hook, I finally decided that I would varnish the transom. I didn't make that decision up until now. I can't tape it off on the cedar because the tape doesn't stick to the cedar very well, so I'm just going to cut the corners, and I'll do the cutting first and then varnish the center out a little bit later. I think it's a great idea. It's making the transom shine, and it's a little bit different than the oiled surface, but I think they'll look great alongside each other. I'm going to finish up at the top of the transom and inside the scull hole, and we're going to let that dry overnight. Now it's the next day, and we're just going around with a piece of 220 sandpaper. The sealer has gone off really nicely, so we're able to sand it, and that's the thing to do, because the sealer has actually raised the grain of the oak a little tiny bit, so it's got like a little fuzz on it when you first touch it before you sand it. And you don't really want that. You want it to be as smooth as possible before you put the varnish on it. So we're going around one time very lightly with 220, just like I said, and it's going to prep up the surface for our first coats of varnish. For our second coat, we're going to be using TotalBoat Gleam Marine Spa Varnish Gloss. Now we're going to just pour a little bit into our paint pot and head over to the boat. This time I'm starting at the breast hook and working my way aft. Now, I can't tell you how much I love this breast hook. I don't know if you can really appreciate this until you really get up to it when the boat is sitting upright and you get a really good look at it. But I'm in the right position and it looks great. You have to be just as careful with this, maybe even more careful than you do with the sealer, because the wood isn't soaking up any of the varnish at this point. It's all laying on the surface and you just don't want to have any runs. So be as careful as you can be and go back and tip it after you've applied the varnish. You work your way down a little bit, go back and tip it before it gets too sticky. So I'm making sure not to get too much on my brush. I'm spreading it out quite a ways in front of myself. I'm making sure I don't get too many runs, and then I'm tipping it out afterwards. Good. I'm going to go on the outside and do that. Spreading varnish like this is really satisfying because it's quite a transformation from the raw wood grain to the shiny surface. You know, it brings out the grain, it brings out the medullary rays. You know, not only is it a protective surface, but it's also a beautification program. Now our second coat here, it's going on really, really nice. It spreads out really, really great, and I haven't thinned it at all. This is right out of the can. It hasn't had any running problems or anything like that. You know, it looks fantastic, bringing a real high gloss to the surface, and that's what it's supposed to do. It's doing it. I just spreading it out and tipping it at the same time as I go down. So I just reach back a little bit and tip it, put a little bit more on the brush, spread it down a little bit further, and then once I've got it covered and worked in just a little bit, I'll just reach back and tip it again, like that. Now, lots of times I like to tip the other way, but this is working out just great this way, and I get to pull it down at the same time if it's a little bit strong on there. Now the varnish is really bringing out the grain here. It makes it just pop. Beautiful. I love oak when it's varnished. I think it's one of the most pretty woods varnished because of the medullary rays. Right in this spot right here, they're not showing anything fantastic, but as you look up forward a little bit, wow, they're just popping right out. So I love it. Yeah, that looks great. Easy to do. Anybody can do that. We're not in any rush, so we can sand in between coats, but this varnish can be coated over after 1 hour at 80 degrees Fahrenheit or whenever it's tack-free. The very last thing for me to do, especially with the boat upside down, is to go around and make sure that I don't have any runs on the very top of the guard or the inwhale, because it would be upside down and those runs would be on the top of the guard when I flip the boat over. It wouldn't look good, it wouldn't be right, and it wouldn't dry right. So I'm just keeping a close eye on those two edges and making sure that I don't leave any runs. You'll notice when I tip, I sometimes go back to my paint pot and scrape off most of the varnish into the pot so that when I tip, I don't have that excess varnish on the brush and I don't add any more to the surface. We've got one coat of TotalBoat Gleam varnish on the gunnels at this point, the inwhales and the guards, and the transom on the inside and the breast hook, and it's really starting to shine because this varnish really has a nice high gloss to it, and it went on there really nice. the whole thing about tipping the boat upside down and doing it this way worked out really nice for us. I mean, we didn't drip any varnish down the sides on the outside or on the inside. You know, if it had run down alongside the frames or done anything like that, I mean, I would have had an awful time trying to clean it up, because I'm only going to oil the inside. I know that wouldn't have worked for me at all, and I couldn't tape it off properly. So this really did work. You know, it's very odd, but it worked out great. And I can't wait to do a few more coats on it, because it's just going to get a little bit smoother and a little bit smoother. It does sand pretty good, real good, just after one day. But if you give it a couple days, it smooths out really nice with just 220, and you put a nice coat over it, and you don't sand through it and different things like that. And just pull every trick in the book if you can, you know, and do the best job you can do. That's what I'm trying to do right here. And like I said, I'm not a professional painter really, but I think just about anybody can do this kind of work if they think it out a little bit and they get the right products, you know. And you know, watch a few videos, because all the information's out there on the internet. So, you know, look at our stuff, and you know, we teach this kind of stuff, and it's kind of fun for us. So, you know, the next thing I want to show you is we're actually going to be making a set of oars very similar to this right here. Now, I've never made a set of oars before. You know, I've made a lot of spars, and I understand how to make things round, and it's really not going to be any problem. What we're going to do is we're going to make them out of one piece of wood instead of all of these stripes in it, all these different laminates and different things like that. I don't know, I never thought it was all that attractive. I like the look of one nice piece of wood, quarter sawn or very close to quarter sawn, and that's what we're going to do. So it just requires that we make it an octagon first and then into round, and it's going to be fun. So stay with us, and that's going to be one of the things we're going to do in the future.